So top splines. This is a hell of a thing, isn't it? Uh, I've probably done more bad top splines or regrettable top splines than I've done good ones. I feel like probably my top splines turned a corner probably about I'd say probably about 5 to 7 years ago. Half of it was getting a little craftier about getting the spline in, and then the other half was just understanding the limitations of what you're going to do with paint to affect change. So one of the things, it's going to be really hard to talk about on here, but the top spline is going into spruce, and whenever I bid a touch-up project, I always do kind of a like an Olympic high diver. I try to judge a degree of difficulty, and kind of my two main criteria for. Oh, Ted, are we ready to go? Are we going?
Yep, we're going. We're good.
Okay. So kind of my two main things for degree of difficulty is lightness versus darkness. Spruce, in terms of wood, about as light as it gets. You know what I'm saying? This light is more challenging than dark. I'd rather touch up a piece of dark rosewood any day, because in 90% of the lighting scenarios that you run into rosewood, if you just go black over it, you're halfway there. Like it's not going to jump out. Light, you've got all of this color information reflecting back at you, and it's pretty challenging to do light touch-ups. Spruce, really, really bland maple, like on, in the bullseye on a 335, like if it was, if the colors faded out, blonde maple can be very challenging too. So the other thing too is chatoyance, or that, the cat's eye effect that we were talking about before. Rule of thumb for me, more chatoyant, more challenging than less chatoyant, up to a certain point. Now, you get like a piece of maple that has all kinds of crazy figure on it, and a lot of times that's so distracting that you can put something like in the middle of it, paint a fake flame or something like that, and there's so much going on that it confuses the eye. However, spruce, pretty darn chatoyant. When I take this piece of wood and roll it around in the light, we're getting all kinds of different colors rolling around in the light. Now, if I was to take this piece of spruce and hold it just like this and mix up some color and put it like right there, and really nail that color, there's a good chance that I could get it to almost disappear on that angle. As soon as I move it into a different angle and we start looking into different fiber patterns in the rest of the wood, that color is going to look ridiculous into the new color that we've shifted the wood into. Everybody clear on that? Nobody has any questions about that? So anyway, there are some things that you can do, but by and large, paint is not your friend on spruce. A little bit of stain here and there can get you there. One of the things, though, is that if it does have color, it tends to get a little bit easier, because color on color looks like, it looks like color. It gives you something to work with. Using color to try to make it look like a different species of wood, or a different cut of wood where the runout's a little bit different. It's just, I've tried it a million different ways, and I'm not saying it can't be done. I certainly haven't tried it 1,000,001 different ways, and you're welcome to try it. But my own instinct right now is that paint on spruce to try to make one kind of spruce look like another kind of spruce is going backwards. Now, so like if we were going to take this to the nth degree, and you certainly can, like the way to approach a touch-up on a spruce top spline is to have a giant warehouse full of spruce where you can go through, and if you talk to the hotshot violin looths, I mean, Iris Carr probably has a tremendous pile of raw material to pull from, and to really dial in the different cuts. You know, in violins, they're not dealing with a lot of run out. The run out that they're dealing with is predictable because it's carved into the instruments rather than sawn into a flat piece of wood and then, put on a guitar top. But there are some things that you can do to check run out and roughly try to get it the same. So I'm rolling this around in the light, and this piece isn't too bad. It doesn't have a light reflection and a dark reflection too bad. Maybe a little bit, everything gets a little bit dark on edge. But if I had a piece of wood that was really chatoyant and I was rolling it around, and all of a sudden I got to like a certain angle and it was like really dark on that angle, I might go through a stash of wood and find out something that had some obnoxiously dark run out look, and I might select that wood. Now, the chances that you get it to where it, presents its dark run out look at the same angle as the piece of wood that you got in there, boy, more power to you. But I mean, certainly give it the college try. But at some point, realize that it's a guitar, it's not a violin. Chances are pretty good it's not a very expensive one. If you're doing it for intellectual curiosity, that's fine. But don't bog yourself down so much that you don't just get in and out of a bread and butter repair and make some money and, get a guitar on down the line. In general, and I talked about this a little bit before, but so I'm looking on this guy here. In general, smaller, like with all the crafty touch up that I've ever done in the world, my splines look better smaller than they look larger. Like this right here is probably, if I was to stick a feeler gauge in it, maybe 15 to 20 thousandths, something like that. If I stick a 15 or 20 thousandths piece of wood in there tightly, and it's roughly the same color, boy, like if I go all the way out to a quarter of an inch, but I really like paint in some crafty medullary rays, or like painted in a fake grain line or something like that, which one's going to look better? Which one's going to look more like something that would be easier to hand back to the customer? People instinctually like your stuff to remain smaller. Like, even if you can paint some kind of like interesting grain line story that, kind of spreads out, in my estimation, smaller is better. It's easier to negotiate with the customer with, and just say, hey, look, like this is tight, and this is spruce, and this is small. So any questions about any of this so far? All right.
You typically, with the chatoyance of the wood, are you basically just aiming for a head-on color match rather than like at an angle? Or do you ever get customers that are really picky and want it from kind of player's perspective to look correct?
I haven't run into anybody. I mean, everybody would love to be picky. I haven't run into too many people that, really know. Most of the people that I run into, they've got a crack in their guitar. They're worried that it's going to get bigger or do damage to the guitar, and they want something solid, and they want something to look like it was competently done. I have a feeling like if I was working in classical guitars, I think it might be more of an issue. It doesn't come up much for me right now. I would say probably the thing that is most helpful in getting the right colors and getting the right, kind of the right look, is to really know your species. Like, if you've got an Adirondack top on an old Martin, it really behooves you to get a chunk of Adirondack spruce to put in. If you're doing scoopies, getting back, off of spruce and onto the chatoyantes of like scoopies, if you got a piece of sugar maple and you're trying to put red maple into it, there's no paint in the world that's gonna make that species mismatch look right. In terms of run out, boy, I don't have, honestly, I'm more of a, I do good work and everything, but I'm not like in the arena where, I can really justify having piles and piles and piles of spruce to stick, to choose from. If I get something where I think it needs to be taken to the next level, I might call a friend and get some older Addy, or I might call a friend and find somebody that's got a busted up guitar that I can steal some spruce off of. So does that answer that question, or is it did I
yeah, no, that's great. Thanks.
Can I go around it? So everybody focus on the picture with the bridge on it. This is in my world in steel string guitars, this is probably, I would say 70% of the repairs that I see are the crack from the bridge down to the tail block. I haven't tried it in a long time, so I don't know. I used to do a lot of bridge on top splines, and oh boy, the amount of effort that you put into trying to make this area in the lee of the bridge look halfway decent. I mean, you might as well have just taken the bridge off within reason. Like almost every one of these cracks right now that is, up under the bridge, I'm gonna bid it as though the bridge is coming off, because it's like almost, invariably when you pull it off, the crack has continued up under the bridge. You might as well have a really good place to hide the end of your spline. So in my shop, I budget to pull the bridge when I see these guys like this. So now so every once in a while, like a Martin pickguard crack, that'll get a sliver of wood in it. Sometimes there's some cracks between, along the fingerboard extension that'll get a sliver of wood in it. Like there you kind of gotta like figure out how to taper your ends down and get them in and make them look good. But most of the reason why the bridge comes off is the finish work. Like I got to put lacquer over that top spline, and sanding out and buffing out around a bridge, and not having, like this lip of lacquer that kind of creeps up the side of the bridge, or, you try to tape it off the best that you can or whatever, and it still kind of like gets up under the tape. Oh boy, that's just, it's not for me anymore. So anyway, it comes off. Any questions so far? All right. How are we doing on seeing this crack? Can everybody kind of see it? So this is as close to an approximation as like within reason that we can do on doing one of these cracks, and having the ability to at least practice with it. So a lot of times when cracks come to me, there's a brace that's under there or something, and maybe the brace has become slightly unglued, and this is, like one side is a little proud of the others, or it's got like a little bit of you know what, actually, let me get this down here, Spencer. Can you pin this guy for me really quick? Let me see here. How's that look? Is this better or worse? Net neutral?
Worse.
Worse.
Yeah, it's at a 3/4 angle in the corner of the screen now.
Okay. And this is one of the reasons why I'm gonna go ahead and do an actual recording of this, and I'll post it later. But the first thing that I want to do is I want to inspect inspect these cracks. Almost all, not almost all, but a lot of cracks that I do splines on have been glued before, and the previous attempt needs to be pulled out. Tight bond, I'm now gluing most of my splines with G-Flex epoxy. That may be heresy for some people. That's fine. But if you've got something that's been tight bonded before, G-Flex and tight bond actually play fairly well together. You do need to clean it out. It needs to be a clean joint to a certain point, but you don't have to go into the wood fibers where the tight bond has penetrated like you would have to do if you were to do another tight bond glue joint. Like you can keep it smaller. You can still get it cleaned out, but keep it smaller. So the first thing I would do is kind of see what I'm dealing with the crack. And this one would be a fresh one, right? But I've got all of these interesting things. Can people see my knife right here? Is this possible? No, hold on a second.
Ian, we were probably better off with the initial top view than the view you have now.
Okay. Hold on a second.
Just because, at least for me, the crack gets washed out in the lighting. I don't know if that's happening with other people.
Sorry, guys. I really tried to get a good helmet cam going, and it wasn't to be. How are we looking there?
Yeah, like that. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
So I wish you guys could zoom in, but so as I'm looking at this, I got all kinds of interesting things like this. You see this little guy in here? That has to come out. So when the crack opened up, like part of it's, it kind of did like an accordion thing. Part of it stayed on one side, part of it pulled to the other side. And this is where like I'm an old man with old eyes. I got to go in with my Optivisor and really make sure that this crack is ready to go. So, and I also want to kind of get a sense of what this crack is looking like in terms of its kind of jagged look. Now, I fit my top splines to the jaggedness. It takes me a long time. Like this run right here could take me, it could take me an hour. It could take me a couple attempts, like 2 attempts to get something that I like. It could take me, I could get all the way to the end of it, have something that I really like, and then break it, pulling it out, and have to do it over again. It's a real chore. But so the other thing I want to see like, is the crack perpendicular to the top? Like if it's leaning a little bit to one side or the other, I might stick a spline in going at a little bit of an angle. If it's like really dramatic, like if it's like not even quartered, even just a little bit, what I may do is I may actually open that up to where it's a little bit square up and down. And basically I do that by taking a knife, or excuse me, a razor blade, and I'll stick like a little bit of sticky sandpaper on it, like so. And then I'll just come in and very carefully draw this down on either side. Until I get that crack going straight up and down. I mean, once again, you're making it wider when you do that. So, I mean, it would have to really be on an extreme angle to do this. For me to think about doing that. Oh, one last thing too is if this is like so dissimilar, like if you've got one side that's proud of the other, and I mean you can't really fit a spline to that because it's so out of whack. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll do like I'll like partially glue it and kind of tack weld it with the with this stuff, and get it nice and flat, and then I'll come back with a saw and saw down into the crack, just so that the G-flex is still hanging on to the bottom of the crack, but it's holding that crack perpendicular. I did a L47 a while back that was so ridiculously warped that I actually glued MDF temp blocks on the underside of it so that it was flat. And the MDF works out really well. It's super flat for a piece of wood, and then when you take it off, the first thing it does is it just breaks off that first layer of fur, and then you've got fairly easy cleanup to do mechanically afterwards. You don't have to do anything crazy to get that MDF out of there. All right, you guys ready to fit some splines? This is a piece of wood that I selected for this. It's not anything fancy. This is going to be about fitting this thing. It's not going to be about trying to really dial in a great run out match or color match or ray match or anything like that. But I take my big everybody still there? I'm trying to figure out how to do this on here. Let's see. So you might be able to rip this on the bandsaw. I find that with a sharp blade, which I'm not sure this is. Well, that did not work at all. Let's see if that's long enough. All right, one more time. All right. So this is my old, I'm gonna clean off some of that nonsense. This is my old dovetailing kind of clean off some of the. So that motion that I'm doing right there is actually very dangerous when you're doing splines. It's okay as this is, you know, fairly thick, but you can imagine once it starts to get thin, if this is 20 thousandths, if I'm pulling back and forward on that, there's a good chance that it's going to inchworm and bust your spline. So like at the very beginning, the backy forthy is okay, but as it gets smaller, definitely back up off of that. All right. Are we squared up on here? I'm gonna get rid of kind of some, just roughly get rid of some of the excess. Get rid of some of this. And I'm also gonna grab some colored pens. Mark one side of the color of the top of the spline, kind of like here and there.
We just lost the overhead cam.
How's that looking?
Can you slide your, well, I guess pan the camera backwards some?
Okay.
Yeah, that ought to work.
Okay. Does everybody kind of understand what I'm doing with the colored marks here? Is as I'm fitting this, it's just going to be like a rough reference point. When I'm going down, I'll be like, okay, green on the base side is just a little bit thick.
So what are you using the different colors to indicate?
So it's just giving me road marks. So I'm fitting, it's hard to see on here, but I'm fitting this to the jaggedness of the crack. So there's two rules of thumb about how you're going to get a spline straight. Either you're going to true up the crack and make a straight spline to go into it, or you're going to fit the spline to the jaggedness of the crack. And so this crack, having torn apart wood fibers, it's hard to see. Maybe I'll take a picture and post it to the Patreon later, but it's got all of these like kind of little wavy things in there. And what'll happen is you can put something in there that's halfway decent, and if you're not, you know, the more you fit it to that waviness, the less glue line that you're gonna see. Like almost everything that looks bad about a top spline, if you know, within reason, get the wood halfway decent, is big glue lines, man. Big glue lines are, especially at top splines, are difficult to disguise. So tighter the fit, the better. So anyway, so these, like right here, I'm looking at this and I go, oh, green isn't sliding in it at all. So I'm going to take a little bit off of both sides. Now it goes in, but it's just very, very tight.
What is that tool you just used, Ian?
This is just my dovetail sanding stick. That's the sanding stick I use for cleaning out. You know, it's got the bevel on there. It's just got a little bit of sandpaper on it.
And that's a piece of metal?
No, it's just old ebony. And that's 220 on that.
Ian, do you ever consider using the straight West Systems epoxy rather than the G-Flex because of the color difference?
I think so. You know, I'm going to mix this up, and my G-Flex has gotten very, very amber. I mix white into it, and it gets to a pretty good look. But I think I am going to be switching at some point. I'm a little tired of dealing with the amber from the G-Flex.
It's very dark.
It's very dark, yeah.
Also, let me just mention this one thing. Rabbit skin glue. It's basically white, and the violin folks use that. I've used it for top splines. It's sort of helpful. If you can get a tight spline, the rabbit skin glue really is pretty helpful.
Let's see. I'm going to pull this down. I'm going to pull the camera down. We'll see if we can get a tight shot on this. Everybody see that? Is that clear what's going on there?
Yep.
So anyway, and then I am just gonna like follow this thing down. It's a little hard to see. I'm just gonna follow that thing down and just very, very carefully, and maybe here you can see how this see this little wow right here. See how like the crack comes down and then it takes a little turn to the right. Here, let me get this out of here and I'll show you. Right here. See how that dips in right there? That's going to be pretty important to that's going to be pretty important to sand into the top spline. Ted, I'm getting pretty good at putting that thing back up there.
Yeah, very consistent.
So here's where this color thing comes in. Now I'm happy up to orange, right? Now I've got a good reference of where I want to like make sure that I'm not sanding anymore. Like maybe it needs a little bit of love here and there. It's like maybe just a little bit proud at orange, but I really like probably most of my sanding is like north of orange just by a little bit, or south of orange, depending on how you look at it. So things that you got to be careful of is taking the spline in and out. Like if you force it in and it gets tight in there and you pull it out, I mean you're gonna break it. Alan, how differently is this from what you get up to?
It's very similar. I mean, you're using the sanding stick the same way I do. I might open up the crack depending upon what's necessary, or actually not open it up by abrading it, but I might just push the wood fiber aside and fit in the spline, you know, if we're just talking about thousandths of an inch. But basically you're doing, this is what one does. I mean, the real differences are going to be in the adhesive and the possibility of actually adding a spline to the spline in some cases. You know, I mean, sometimes if the crack width varies wildly, one might be forced to do that. And if you're using the right adhesive, there's not really a big downside to adding a spline to the spline, because it'll just look like a grain line, or you can pull out a grain line to add a spline to the spline, if you know what I mean. It gets very niggly though. I mean, it's you know, it's nerdy work.
It should be, I should mention on that, like if I came down here and it was missing a big chunk like in here, I might get out some wax paper and put this down and then put like 10,000, you know, like super glue 10,000ths of spruce onto the side of the spline to pick up that slack. Is that kind of what you're talking about, Alan, or are you talking about cutting it in later?
Yeah, yes. Or you can cut it in later. I mean, there's no downside to either technique. Is going to, the end is to fill the hole, and having done that, you know, it's all golden, you know, really. You know, and as you said, if you get the right piece of spruce, you know, you're way ahead of the game. I mean, just by yards.
You guys hear me breathing? You can't see it, but I get my tongue sticking out pretty good too. Anybody else that does top splines see anything that they'd like to add? I'm one guy doing this stuff, and boy, I can't. I may be getting old and stuck in my ways. So what I'm trying to say is I'm open to hearing from other people how they do stuff. This is hardly a vehicle for me to completely stroke my ego, like I like to leave room for other people to share what they're up to. So anybody
Well, you were mentioning the using MDF to cleat the cracks. I was going to say that I almost always cleat a crack that's more than 4 inches. It might be a single cleat in the center just to keep the panel from deflecting, especially when I'm putting the spline into the crack. You know what I mean? That's really the dangerous part, is if it deflects when you're inserting the spline. So, that problem.
Well, so on steel strings, and I know you work a lot more on nylon strings than me, so this isn't like kind of an option on a lot of nylons because of the size of the sound hole. But I usually put scissor jacks in, and then I'll jack up waxed MDF on the inside of the guitar to keep the deflection down.
A very good idea. Scissor jacking it could kind of open up the mouth of the crack too, so you could sort of drop the spline in and then drop the scissor jack and just get it fit that way. I've done that a couple of times.
Dan, so I'm getting this closer to the end, and so at some point this is going to have to fit in here, so I'm going to have to make some decisions about where I'm going to snip this at. Some people will do an angled snip here, like they'll angle it so that as you press it in, it'll get tighter. I haven't had good luck with that. So I got an interesting situation down here too. I was maybe a little bit hasty with my knife. I've got like a little bit of a fray. So you guys are in for a real treat. I'm gonna try to repair this fray, which comes up from time to time in this. So I got wax paper there. I've got, I don't know if you guys can see this. Can you see this little lifting? My hand's in the way probably. This little lifting part right here. Is that coming through? So anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to like give this a little bit of thin CA. I'm gonna kick some wax paper. I'm gonna hold that kicked wax paper over the affliction there. That move of doing the kicked wax paper, like if you've ever got like a finish chip around a bridge that comes out or something like that, like that's a really good move. like it holds that, you can hold it in place, and the wax paper is just not ever going to stick to the super glue. Like I've had super glue stick to my X-Acto knife, I don't know how many times, and it just like it like the finished chip will like adhere to my knife. I'll hold it down and then it'll pull away with my knife. With the kicked wax paper, I've just never had that problem.
That was worth the price of admission, Ian.
People really love that tip. I forget where I picked that up at too.
That's awesome.
That might have been from a trade secret. Okay. So it's going in pretty good. Now I'm pressing it in, I'm looking on either side, really trying to determine, like you don't want to go at this like completely just like sanding. You get to this point, you're like, oh my God, is this never going to end? So here's where that little kick out is. And I'm putting 2 marks on either side of the kick out. You guys remember when I said there was like a little wow in there? And I'm putting like maybe a little X on either side because I don't really want to sand on that. I just want to sand on which side that little wow, it's gonna let it in.
Ian, do you ever taper your splines slightly?
I probably do just a little bit. I find like if I'm fitting this to like a crack like this, if that crack isn't tapered, then I always wind up with like kind of more glue line than I would like. But that could just be me. That could be user error.
What do you do to taper it, Ian? I used to use like 2 razor blades in a vise.
Yeah, I mean,
I just sand it in.
You sand it, yeah.
I probably do. I probably do hold my. I probably do just instinctually. I probably do hold my sanding stick just like at a very minute angle.
Yeah, there has to be some angle.
I think so. I mean, you want it to go in, and you want it to be tight towards the end of the run. I mean, the spline in my mind, the spline is really, it's aesthetic, like honestly, like a lot of these cracks, like this crack right here, if I was just to heap colored G-Flex into that crack is going to be solid for, a long
100%. This is all cosmetic. I think that's important to remember.
Yeah.
But, aesthetics are important.
They are important. I was starting to question, what I got up to with aesthetics a little bit. And then as I follow Iris a little bit more and see what she gets up to, I think, son of a gun. If that's what people are into, like, who am I to tell the customer they're stupid because they want something to look good at the end of the proceedings, like it's not my place to tell people they're idiots for giving me money,
Well, in the guitar business, people are buying relic guitars, which is but yeah.
Yeah, especially that Mark Maron. Oh, I hate him so much.
I don't know him, thank God.
Well, he made Tyler Geskey's life miserable for a day.
Well, if you ever need to spline his guitar, Ian, I would stop right where you are and give it back to him.
I have a 5-pound sledge I could spline his guitar with.
So you notice how, like my sanding started out fairly cavalier and now it's like slowing down to a lot of like, well, and a lot of, like this may not be for everybody. This is barely for me. Like there's a lot of anxiety in this for me. Some of the anxiety I'm experiencing right now is because people are watching and I don't like people looking at me. But some of it is just like it's very fussy work, Like if you're into like tying flies, I think like this would be, if you enjoy that kind of stuff, then. So we're starting to get a lot of spline down in the hole, and this is where it can get very tricky to get the spline back out. Like I've got a lot of spline in the hole. This is like a little fussy thing, and I don't know if you noticed that, but I just kind of instinctually did that. It's very tempting to like want to start pulling it up and out like that. I usually grab it by one end and then I'll drag it back like that. And a lot of times that's the make or break on well, not breaking it. So
splining cedar is especially prone to breakage because of the nature of cedar. It's a nightmare.
So this is like the entire run of the spline is now in the is starting to go into the crack. This is where it gets very dangerous. Doug Proper just sent me these awesome tweezers. Oh my God, here they are. Tweezers are your friend in this deal. If you get down here and you need to get this out, having a good set of tweezers can help. You don't want to like totally compress it. The other thing that helps is if this was a guitar and it was all the way in and I was fighting it, I would probably reach into the inside of the guitar and just flex that crack just enough to where it puckered out enough for that spline to lift out of there. But boy, this is how long have I been at this now? Like the investment in this little piece of wood now has become substantial, and like I get fussy going backwards, and so I'll probably break the next one. If I was to break this one, I would probably break the next one right away because I was already pissed off about having to do it over. So it behooves you to kind of like pay attention and slow down and think about this stuff. Hey Dan, you had told me about some fellow that was like compressing splines and then gluing them in. Dan Earlywine, are you still here?
I do that sometimes.
I tried it just kind of because Dan told me about it. It didn't work worth a shit with G-Flex. I wonder if it's a water-based glue only
It's
kind of.
It's a water thing. It's definitely a water thing. Yeah. With G-Flex, it wouldn't make any sense because it wouldn't open up again. You add some water to spruce and it puffs up like so it's a viable technique. I just use a scraper, one of the calls that you use to put a burr on your scraper. Mm-hmm. Just roll it down.
So we're getting down to the wire here. If you notice, like I'm not going back and forth now, like I'm at the very end of it. I'm just giving it some nice little, unidirectional, like love sands there.
Ian, I may have missed it. What is it that you're sanding the spline with? Is there sandpaper on the front edge of that?
Yeah, there's a
Got it.
sandpaper.
And there's sandpaper, you're doing it on sandpaper, correct? And that's what's keeping it held in place.
Jeez.
Genius. Much better than double-faced tape.
Yeah. The sandpaper, it helps hold. So this is on a glass. If you've never made yourself, if you have a granite flat plate, that's great. But if you haven't, if you don't have room for a granite flat plate, MDF with some plate glass on the top of it makes great sanding stuff. So this is actually, this sandpaper right here, this is double stick sandpaper, and I'm using that to resist the thing sliding around.
Got it. Awesome.
Now I talked to you and I forgot which color I was supposed to sand on.
It's all my fault.
It really is. All right, so let's take this guy down. All right, so we'll do well, who's ready to blow up the Death Star? We clear on what's going on there? Fairly clear? Anybody unclear?
Looks good.
If you're unclear, say so. Do we still got our camera, Ted? I pushed a button.
Yeah, we're wide now though. Can you hit the zoom in?
Okay, hold on. Oh, if I could use Filmic Pro for this. All right. So
How much penetration do you look for, Ian?
I like a lot. I mean, ideally, it would go all the way through the. It would go all the way through. Sometimes, indiscretion is the better part of Valerie, and you're better off just letting the glue do the work. Because
sure,
if you do this, if you put this spline in it and it breaks, boy, oops, put it in upside down. No colored dots.
if you can put it in upside down, that means you did a really good job sanding it.
Yeah, I may be showing off. I don't know. Okay, so we get it in, right? It's a little bit more sanding. Now, Alan and the cleats is definitely an excellent way of doing it. If you can get that crack pre-leveled, then your glue up job is pretty much just gluing the spline in. Like, you don't have to do everything at once. I may have to rethink that because now that's sounding pretty awesome. But I glue up and I glue the crack at the same time. I glue the spline in and I glue the crack at the same time. And so the way that I'm going to do that is I want to leave this spline just a little bit proud of the top of the guitar. That way, when I come back with some plexiglass, I can slam it home, and it's not going to break the spline. And then everything's going to kind of come together in that last little kind of crush, and I'm probably going to get just a slightly tighter joint than I would otherwise as a result. Or at least that's the conjecture.
So the plexiglass isn't going to fold over the spline with the part
No, because what I'm going to do next, I'm just going to get this fitting just a little bit tighter.
I just want to keep distracting you.
I'm going to give that just a little bit more CA.
Your work board's not centered in the overhead camera anymore.
Okay. Where does it need to go? This way?
Lost that top camera.
Yeah, it just went away right after I said something.
No, it's because the batteries getting low.
You complain, Ted, you get nothing.
It's all my fault, guys. Sorry.
How are we looking?
A little more towards you.
A little less.
Yeah. That'll do. Nice.
That'll do, Peg. One's hanging this up at the very end. I think that there's a little, yeah, little adjustment down there. Okay, she's in pretty good. Now then, so I want like a little bit of that guy sticking up. The other thing that I want is I want the top of that thing to be roughly the radius of the top. So the way I do that is I take a razor blade, blue tape, this move right here, get to know this move. This comes up a lot in my shop. But I'll take a pair of side cutters and grab that spine and just go back and forth with it like that. And it usually releases that razor blade so you don't have a spine on the back of it. There's the spine, there's the back. And I'm gonna wipe the get the oil off of there. These are particularly Chinese razor blades, so they're nice and oily. And then I'm gonna give myself so you can probably see it on my Instagram. I've done top splines on like L5 archtop guitars. Like this next move is really important for doing a top spline on a like an archtop and getting it to go together halfway decently. So that's 2 pieces of blue tape, and that's just going to be like a little bit of a riser for my razor blade there. And then that's going to give me just the amount of offset to where there's enough sticking up out of there that I can cram it down with the plexiglass. Don't rush this. If you grab that run out, it'll turn this to doo-doo. Ideally, that's going to be real even. We'll see what's going on there. Boy, the white balance on this or the exposure is just trash. Can we see everybody clear on what's going on there? Anybody unclear? I just peeled this top layer off. Basically, if you've got like all of the modern steel string acoustic guitars are going to have some arch to the top. If you try to glue like a flat spline into it, it's gonna be kind of making you sad. So anyway, I don't have much sticking out of here now. This can be very dicey to get back out. This is where I'll usually reach back in and just start working the crack from either side, and just kind of work it until it starts spitting that crack out.
This is where our methods diverge. I wouldn't have trimmed that. I'd trim it after gluing.
Yeah.
And how are you doing that on the inside of an arch top?
Pushing it back and forth.
Yeah.
Well, this one is presenting me with some difficulties. I think because I was showing off and I fed it tighter than I normally do. But normally I don't have this much problem getting these out of here. But yeah, I would reach in through the F hole, or I would reach in through the pickup hole. Maybe I'd this is the problem with being too macho for thin picks. I'd maybe stick a feeler gauge back through on the inside and bring it out that way too. Boy, that is just not giving it up. Let me grab a feeler gauge. Okay. So there it is. So on the inside of the guitar on a steel string acoustic, I'd have MDF. I'd have MDF coming up the back. For the sake of this, we're going to use this glass flat plate. I'd have wax paper on the underside of it. Has anybody priced nitrile gloves lately? Harbor Freight, $18 a box. So if you got, what color?
It's
Evan?
important.
Blue.
Blue?
Yeah, they're blue, Evan.
Okay, it's a dark blue. I just don't want to look like my hand is like in a Roger Rabbit movie or something when customers come in.
Sorry guys, I should have got my stuff together before I did this. So naphtha is your friend with the epoxies and cleanup. One of the things about this is that cleanup is a little bit of a thing with the G-Flex epoxy. So once it goes off, your only cleanup is going to be mechanical, mechanical sanding. I've just kind of developed techniques for it. If you're new to this, just be very aware that epoxy on finish, I mean, it's not without its risks. So just go into that with that in mind. Now, I don't have much of a problem with it anymore, but I could see it being a problem. The other thing too is what I do have a problem with is getting it on my hands and then leaving fingerprints in various locations. So there's that.
But before it starts kicking off, you can clean it up with naphtha.
Yeah, before naphtha is really good at cleaning up epoxy.
Cool.
I'm going to add a little bit of white pigment. But like I find that the white and the G-Flex kind of come together to look, somewhat similar to wood there. And then I do this in kind of two parts here. I squeegee this into the crack. Like so.
Using a Q-tip?
Yeah, just the hard end of the Q-tip.
Okay.
Then I'll come back and get my epoxy off there. I'm not like wiping over the crack because the paper towel will pull the epoxy right back out of your crack.
And that's got naphtha on it, that paper towel, correct?
This doesn't yet.
Oh, okay.
This doesn't. Then I'm going to take my spline. I've lost my my marks, but I know which side was thicker and which side was thinner. Put some epoxy on the spline. So this stuff right here, getting this tight and then getting it into the crack. One of the reasons why I don't use tight bond or hide glue or any of that stuff is the swelling is just unpredictable in my estimation. So I don't know if you guys saw that, but I've got like a nice, putting like a nice layer of that on there. With the epoxy, it really wants to slip in there. Now I'm going to get my naphtha. And get as much of this off as I can without wiping. We're relying on that epoxy to do just a little bit of filling too. I have never been able to completely, just completely dime out that fit. Like, there are probably people better than me at this, but I'm still relying on the epoxy to pick up a little bit of the slack in my fit. So I'm coming back and I'm wiping, but I'm not trying to pull that, get that so clean that I have zero cleanup to do. There's going to be cleanup. How are we feeling about that? That showing off at all?
Yeah, it looks good.
So then I would have wax paper over the outside. Wax paper over the outside. And then clamp to taste. I like a thick plexiglass. If you use a thin plexiglass, it can deflect. Plexiglass is not a panacea for flatness. By the way, you really got to watch what you're doing and look at tensions and all that kind of good stuff. Not long enough. Oh well. I had a long one somewhere. All right. How long we been at this, Ted?
Recording started an hour and 40 ago, so probably like an hour and 20 minutes.
So we're only half done. We're done for today, but we're only like this is just where the fun starts. We gotta level that thing, and we'll do that next time. Any questions about today's proceedings?
Hey, Ian, I was wondering if you could show those tweezers that Doug gave you. It looked like kind of like a little do-it-yourself modification with.
No, I think they're pretty legit. It's something to do with dental stuff, but it's got, yeah, you can take.
We can't see them, Ian. There we go.
You can take the pincers. You can take the pincers out of them.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Ian, did you go over when you broke your workboard to make the crack and then putting it back together? Was that in a previous video?
It is, yeah. I think so. Yeah, I pretty much, Spencer, I just went like that and broke it down the middle, and then I took two. You could take a shaving off of either end, make that shaving 20 thousandths, and then put 20 thousandths in the middle and glue it back together. I think I did the old trick of having 4 nails and the top kind of like, up a little bit, and then pressed it down into place with them. Does that make sense? I think that's a classical guitar style top joinery.
Hey, Ian.
Yes, sir.
So every once in a while, we'll run into these cracks that are aligned okay, but they seem to kind of both pucker upwards, kind of like volcano shape towards the top. Do you have any particular tricks for getting those indexed or fitting a spline, something like that?
I mean, the thing about the puckering cracks is, I mean, sometimes the magic doesn't work, but I find that if you just kind of like double down on rigid plexi and crush everything into place with like make sure that you use an ibex clamps and really get everything crushed into place, it's a good move. Alan's idea of cleating and getting everything in place before you put the spline in, it's not, that's a really good idea. I personally I think part of this is for a long time I've been cleat phobic, just because that's the way that the steel string vintage market kind of went. People were frowning on cleats for a long time, and I kind of came up during that generation. So, but maybe it needs to be reinvestigated, because
If I may comment on this puckered panel thing, usually you see that puckering when the crack hasn't been repaired, like somebody just neglected repairing that crack for years, and it's gone through climatic changes over seasons after season. So what I would do in some cases is moisten that crack and then compress it in the way that Ian was mentioning. So you can add some moisture, hydrate it, and then compress it, and then examine it, and then repeat as necessary. But eventually it'll go back together again. And that's how that's done,
That's good, Alan, because actually a lot of Laravies, when Laravies crack, they do this like volcano thing.
Yeah, because they're not dry to begin with.
Yeah.
Anything else? Anybody, Bueller? All right, peoples.
Very cool. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you,
Ian.
I appreciate everybody hanging around and watching the top spine thing, and we'll see you next month. We'll look at some leveling strategies and some finishing strategies and all that kind of stuff. Who thinks this thing would be good later on to duplicate, except for the sunburst? Does anybody think sunburst touch up is worth checking out?
Well, that's kind of the new frontier, really. I mean, if you're going to take it to that level,
To be honest, I find like I got techniques for doing the sunburst touch-ups. I find anything with color to be infinitely more easy than blonde spruce. We'll build some up after the next one. I think the next one after this will be SG colors or some Gibson red colors. So anyway, hey, y'all have a good rest of your Sunday. And as always, if you have any questions that occur to you later, just hit me on my email, and I'll do my best to answer them.
Can I actually ask one more question?
Yeah. Hit it, Spencer.
So when you've taken the spine off your razor blade, hit it with a couple pieces of tape, and then scored the top before you're putting your spline in a final time before you're ready to glue it up. When you're hitting it with clamps and plexiglass, are you forcing it slightly further in so it's flush, or just crushing the top?
Little bit of everything, yeah.
A little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Cool.
And like if you were, you would want to be very careful. Like if you go into that and you wind up digging out, and you trim yourself like a little bit of a high spot, then that high spot can translate into you pushing everything below the plane of the top. You have a little bit on most guitars. You have, on most modern guitars, you're going to have anywhere between 7 and 10 thousandths of finish, sometimes 15 thousandths. So there's definitely some wiggle room there. I mean, these things are going to have to be taken down below the plane of the finish anyway. So, but anyway, yeah.
How many counts of lacquer do you have on your workboard?
On my workboard? Oh, we're very thin on my workboard. I did probably, I think, eight coats. Everybody still there?
Yeah.
Paul, you look,
silence.
Paul, you look suspicious. Are you suspicious of this whole thing?
No, it's great.
All right.
Thanks.
Ian, you're too paranoid, Ian. Everybody loves it.
I'm just teasing. I tease. All right, my wife just got home and she had to deal with a dead battery, so I gotta go see what's going on. I'll talk to you all later.
Thank you, Ian.
Bye, Ian.
Thanks.
See you, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, people.